afternoon, everyone. I hope you had a fantastic weekend. Here is another video to help you liberate your mind. So, this is kind of a part two for the video I did last week on limiting beliefs. The reason I'm doing a part two is because it's a big topic, and actually, if we're honest, it's kind of the real problem that everybody has. So I'm not going to go into massive details again about what beliefs are, except to just remind you that essentially our beliefs form our reality. It's how we make sense of the world, and it's how we express ourselves through a filter of what we believe about ourselves. So something I mentioned in the last video was that our emotions play a big part in the beliefs that we have about ourselves. And something else to be aware of is actually the more emotional a memory is, the more easy it is for us to remember it. And the reason for that is because the emotion is what almost triggers the brain to say, that's important. So I need to remember that, I need to store that. So when I'm working with a customer, a client, and I'm saying, we will most of the time be using those emotions to locate the source or the root cause of a problem. Because even when someone doesn't know when it happened, they know how it feels now. And if you know how it feels now, it's always the same program. So the other thing that I will say to clients is, you don't need to remember the very first time, because it will always be the same program that fires, the same emotions that you're feeling. It is preferable to go to the first one, because obviously if you go to the first one, you can really get to the original moment, and then you can kind of collapse them all on the way back, a bit like a necklace or a chain or something like that. But you know, it's a bit like a block of Jenga. You take the right blocks out and the whole thing comes tumbling down. So we already mentioned about the fact that it's about questioning and reanalyzing, revisiting our beliefs, so that we can start to see that most of them actually, especially most of those memories, most of those programs are formed in early life, and they don't change unless we do something very active about it, right? These programs, these patterns that get created and stored, basically then play. I like to think of it, and this is a nice little metaphor I use. I think I nicked this from one of my mentors, Brad Henning. Basically, we're a bit like a jukebox, in the sense that we have these programs or these CDs that we play. And you can use this metaphor with all kinds of things, but when that CD gets put on, you have those kinds of thoughts, right? Or when you put that CD, or you're playing that movie or that memory, then it creates, and it's that kind of pattern. And we have also different personas and different, when I'm taking someone into an old memory where they're a lot younger, they actually become that younger self in a very unconscious way. It's almost like they put that CD into the player and they become that. And you can actually get quite a childish reaction from somebody when they take on the characteristics of who they were in that moment. It's kind of fascinating. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is that there is a formula, right? A formula that I will be working on as a therapist. And I'm going to let you into this little formula because it's something that you can start to bear in mind when you are starting to challenge some of your beliefs that may not be serving you anymore. And that formula is that you want to, first of all, identify the belief that you want to change, because you know that it's not serving you. And then it's about starting to challenge it, right? You're trying to weaken, almost like it's like a stool, right? The belief's at the top, and then you've got these legs, all of these things that make you believe that that's true, and you're just basically trying to weaken it by using your adult brain, because once you are an adult, you have access to your prefrontal cortex, and that is how you analyze and understand a situation based on the logic rather than just the emotion of what was going on in the moment. And when you revisit memories like that, coming from a place of here, and make sure when you do that, that you are in a good place. You are calm, you are, not stressed, you're not anxious, because if you're not up here and you're down there in that emotional center of your brain, you won't be able to see the answers. You won't be able to see what you couldn't see at the time, right? So make sure you're in a good place when you start to examine your beliefs, because if you're not, you will be looking at the world through a filter of negativity, obsession. You won't have access to your logic and all the rest of it, right? So basically that's key. So you want to start weakening it, right? You want to start challenging it and questioning it. And then once you've done that, you kind of want to really pull the last leg out of it, and you can see now that it's just ridiculous. It didn't mean what you thought it meant. At which point you now need to start, well, if it doesn't mean that, what does it now mean? And this is where you're replacing it. So you've identified it, you've weakened it, you've collapsed it. Now you're saying, what do I want instead? And then of course you're going to strengthen it. And then you're going to make it a fact. And then you can exit, right? So that is what I'm doing as a therapist to that, well, not to them, but with my clients. And so that's why it's good to work with a therapist, because you've got someone that's got the roadmap and everything else in the background, and all they need to do is take you through a process or ask you the right questions, because I can't make someone change. I can't convince anybody of anything. All I can do is get them to come to that conclusion on their own, and the moment they believe it, it becomes real and true for them, at which point they heal themselves. I know that they're not broken. The only problem with most people is that they think there's something wrong with them. And because they believe that, and their brain has now found all this evidence that backs up that belief, it becomes a reality. It starts to cause them issues. But when you start to go back in and you start to look at the moment where you made that decision, you realize that actually it's not what you thought. You then, once you've seen all the evidence, it's now collapsed. You're like, well, if it doesn't mean that, what does it mean? And there is a window or a moment when I can see that collapse has happened, and it's now my job to get my client to find new evidence that strengthens what they now know to be true, until it becomes a knowing rather than a, it could mean this. It's I know. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you a couple of little techniques that you can do to help with this, because you need to get the emotions out the way, right? Because if the emotions are still there, it's very difficult for you to see the wood for the trees. So the first thing I'm going to do is something called faster EFT. Now the reason it's called faster is because it is the faster version of it. EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. And this method was created by Robert Smith. So he realized that although when you do the full version, there's so many different things to tap on, it's also called tapping. With him, he realized there were only some very key areas that needed to be tapped on, and you can actually do it in half the time. So the points to tap on are between the eyes, to the side of the eye, underneath the eye, onto the collarbone, which is about where the necklace would hang here. And then you grab the wrist, you take a big deep breath in, and you just imagine something peaceful. And while you're doing this, it's really important that you're focusing on the emotion that you don't want. Basically, this belief, when you know you've got a belief that you believe because you feel it. So when you're feeling the feeling you get when you're focusing on that belief, aim it at that. So you're now tapping and you're saying, it's okay, I can let this go. It doesn't mean what I thought it meant. It's safe to let this go now. I'm letting this go. And then you take that and you can say a word like peace or it's gone, whatever makes sense to you. Now if you repeat that and you're focusing your attention at the feeling, what this does is it interrupts the signal. These are meridian points or pressure points in the body, And because the brain is like, this isn't what normally happens when I'm feeling this feeling, it interrupts the signal and it releases that tension from the body. Once you've done that several times and you can't feel it anymore, there is another important meridian point just between here, basically between the two tendons down here. And this is a Chinese medicine technique, right? The translation, I believe, is the triple warmer. Don't ask me why it is. But when you tap on that, so you take your non-dominant hand, you take your dominant hand and you're tapping furiously on this part here, and you're basically then replacing it with the words that you want. I believe this, I believe that, and you're saying it and you're tapping that, and again it's sending a wonderful signal up your body which actually feels good, right? And you're locking that feeling in and you're backing up that emotion with what you're saying. You're saying it in an enthusiastic way, you're tapping there to reinforce it. And if you do that, so if you're going into some kind of meeting and you're feeling nervous, or an exam or something like that, if you're saying, I've got this, I can do this, I feel good about this, I can't wait to get in there, and you're tapping away, you're going to feel good, you're going to do well, you're going to perform. All right? So the final thing you can do, it's more advisable to go to a therapist for this next bit, but there is something, some people are quite good at doing this stuff on their own. It's a little bit like a visualization technique, or what you can do is like a meditation, something like that. So basically what you can do is you can get yourself into a good place, right? Calm, maybe done the emotion for a little while, and you can then basically track the emotion back and ask yourself, when was the earliest moment? When did I make this decision? Follow that feeling. When did I first feel like that? And when you get there, I want you to go there as an adult, almost like you've gone back in a time machine and you're now stepping detached in that setting, in that memory. You can see yourself there, you can see what's going on, you can see the whole situation, but you're detached, you're disassociated from it, you're staying up here, and you're really looking at what's actually going on here. And I guarantee you, if you're doing it right, it won't make sense, right? You'll be looking at it and you're going, I thought it meant this, but it was nothing to do with me. And it's like you can just drop this belief like a stone, because you can see the truth. It wasn't about me, it wasn't personal. That person was having a bad day, or it was their issue and they were taking it out on me. So if it doesn't mean that, I can let this go. And what you can then do is you could just imagine floating away from it. Float away from it as high as you need to until you just can't feel it anymore. And you can look at everything leading up to that moment. You can say, I let this go. The feeling's gone. And then just to prove that it's worked, you can float down into your body, into that little version of you, look around at the situation, and I guarantee you it will feel different. It won't be the same, because you're not the same at that point. You've seen it, you've understood it. Have a go. And if you need some support, get in touch. Have a great week.